morning some 11 miles to the west from Hagerstown, and they both meet on the mountain.
The area around Wise's cabin was hotly contested. This part of the battlefield was fought over the entire day, and square foot for square foot, the fighting was just as intense here as you'll find on any other Civil War battlefield. Antietam, Gettysburg, doesn't matter. Soldiers long after the war talked about how hot and intense the fighting was in this part of the field. The Wise's cabin became a feature. It was well defined, it was easy to see, so a lot of the troops referred to it in their after-action reports and in their diaries and things like that. So the fighting swirled around Wise's cabin throughout the entire day. As the Confederates tried to launch their counterattack, they used what was called the Sharpsburg Road at that time as a line to form up in. They started to move across Wise's south field towards the Federals that were lined up along a stone wall against the south end of that field. Unbeknownst to them, of course, this was the remainder of the 9th Corps that had managed to get itself up on top of the mountain before they launched their attack.
In the rush to get their men on the field, some Confederate troops wound up getting lost on the west face of the mountain. These lost troops were supposed to have been part of a larger contingent of Confederate troops that were supposed to be a grand movement that was to sweep the Federals from the mountain. As a result, only one regiment of troops from the Plan 3 entered the field of battle and ended up taking heavy casualties.
One new regiment, the 17th Michigan, about 900 green troops, fresh out of Michigan, less than 2 weeks, managed to get in a field behind Drayton's troops, come up behind them, and fire down into what is now the Reno Monument Road. Drayton's men take horrific casualties. One regiment went in with 250 men and came out with 120. More than 50% casualties. And some of the bodies in the well, in Wise's well at South Mountain, probably were Drayton's men.
And you hear the exact same comments about that part of the road as you hear about Bloody Lane. Men's bodies stacked like cordwood. You could walk from one end of the road to the other without once touching the ground because of the large number of bodies that were stacked in there. Because of that, of course, the 50th, 51st Georgia had to get out of the way they could. They had to run the gauntlet down the road and off the west side of the mountain, ending the fighting in that part of the field.
So what exactly is the legend of Wise's Well? Here, in its entirety, is the 1992 presentation of the legend of Wise's Well.
This is the monument that marks the spot where General Reno was killed during the Battle of South Mountain. The Battle of South Mountain was a bloody battle. Folks that had witnessed that said that it seemed like the side of the mountain ran red with blood. There were several generals killed during that battle. But after the battle was over, as darkness fell, the Confederates retreated under cover of darkness and marched over to Sharpsburg. Now, the next morning when the sun came up and the Union generals looked over the battlefield, the Confederates were gone. They had retreated during the night. All they saw were the dead and dying just strewn all over the battlefield. Now, as quickly as possible, they took care of the wounded, but they didn't have time to bury the dead. But they realized if they left those bodies out there in the hot September sun, there might be a catastrophe. There might be an epidemic. So they decided that they would offer $1 a body to all the local farmers to bury those dead Confederates. Now, right here in this spot is Fox's Gap. This is where some of the worst fighting took place of the entire day. And just a stone's throw from here is the spot where Old Man Wise had his log cabin. Now, that cabin was in horrible shape before the battle. But the morning after the battle, folks could not believe that the cabin was still standing. It was so full of holes from cannons and shot and shell. Now that morning, as he strolled out and looked in his yard, he saw bodies everywhere. And he had heard about that offer of $1 a body. And he looked out there and he thought, I'm going to make myself a heap of money. So Old Man Wise started out over the battlefield and started to drag those dead bodies, one by one, back to his house. And he had all these bodies laying there in his front yard.